Ethan Miller had not been thinking about the past when the knock came, and that was exactly why it shook him so deeply, because his life had become carefully quiet, almost sealed, like a room with the lights dimmed to avoid seeing the dust, and on that rainy Sunday evening in a small Oregon town, he was only planning to heat leftovers and sleep early, unaware that one sound at the door would pull years of memory, emotion, and responsibility back into his world at once, and when he opened it, there stood Clare Harper, his older sister, soaked from the rain, holding a single suitcase, her expression steady but fragile, as if she had practiced not breaking down, and for a long moment neither of them spoke because time itself seemed unsure how to move forward, since they had not lived together since their teenage years, back when their shared house was filled with tension, grief, and a mother trying to hold two children from different marriages together, a mother who was no longer alive, which made Clare's presence feel heavier than just a visit, and Ethan stepped aside without asking questions, because family was something you did not leave standing in the rain, even when it arrived unexpectedly, and once inside, Clare looked around the house slowly, noticing how neat and empty it felt, how every object seemed placed with purpose, like Ethan had designed his life to avoid surprises, and she said she only needed a few months, that her marriage had ended quietly but painfully, and that she needed time to breathe, and Ethan nodded, saying yes before fully understanding what yes meant, because saying no would have meant reopening wounds he had spent years closing, and as she moved her suitcase into the guest room, memories followed her, memories of late-night arguments, shared breakfasts, and long silences after their mother passed away, memories that had never been resolved but only buried, and Ethan felt a tightness in his chest he could not explain. Because he had grown used to being alone, to cooking for one, to coming home to silence, and now the house sounded different, footsteps in the hallway, a door closing softly, the hum of another person's life entering his own, and Clare tried to act normal, thanking him, smiling gently, but her eyes showed exhaustion, the kind that comes from months of holding things together for others while falling apart inside, and as they sat at the kitchen table drinking tea, the rain tapping against the windows, they talked about safe things, work, the town, how strange it felt to be back, avoiding the real reasons she was there, avoiding the years they had lost, and Ethan noticed how much she had changed, stronger in some ways, quieter in others, carrying the weight of choices that did not work out, and Clare noticed how Ethan avoided eye contact when conversations drifted toward the past, how his voice stayed calm but distant, like someone who had learned to survive by not feeling too deeply, and when the night grew late, Clare went to bed early, leaving Ethan alone in the kitchen, staring at his reflection in the dark window, realizing that his quiet life was already shifting, because Clare's arrival was not just about giving her a place to stay, it was about reopening family, grief, and unfinished emotions, and as he turned off the lights and walked down the hallway, he felt something he had not felt in a long time, not fear, not excitement, but a sense that whatever came next would matter. That this was not a small moment but the start of something he was not ready for, because some people do not just move into your house, they move into the parts of you that never fully healed, and Ethan went to bed knowing that the silence he had protected for years was gone, replaced by the quiet tension of shared space, shared history, and the heavy truth that life was about to move again, whether he wanted it to or not. Living together again changed the house faster than Ethan expected, because Clare did not arrive loudly but her presence slowly filled every corner, and within days, the silence Ethan had built his life around was replaced by movement, quiet conversations, and the soft noise of another routine blending into his own, and mornings began earlier as Clare brewed coffee before sunrise, evenings lasted longer with shared meals that felt careful at first, as if both of them were afraid of stepping on invisible lines left behind from their past. And Ethan noticed how Clare kept herself busy, cleaning things that were already clean, organizing shelves that did not need order, as if still learning how to exist in someone else's space without becoming a burden, and Clare noticed how Ethan avoided staying in one room too long, how he always had something to do, something to fix, something to distract himself with, and although their conversation stayed polite and calm, there was a quiet tension underneath, not anger but unspoken history, because they had never truly talked about their mother's illness, her passing, or the way both of them had drifted away. Afterward, and one afternoon while sorting through old boxes in the garage, Clare found items that had not been touched in years, old letters, school awards, and a framed photo of Ethan standing beside a woman on a windy beach, both of them smiling in a way that felt honest and unguarded, and Claire recognized the name written on the back, Lena, a name she remembered from years ago, and when she asked Ethan about the photo, his answer was short, careful, and distant, and Claire understood that this was not just a past relationship but a wound he never allowed to close, and that realization made her see him differently, not as the quiet, steady brother who always seemed in control, but as someone who had simply learned how to hide loss well. And over the next few days she watched him more closely, noticing how he paused at certain songs on the radio, how he grew quiet when couples passed by on the street, and how loneliness followed him even in his own home. And one evening, after dinner, Claire spoke more honestly than she had since arriving, telling him that he did not have to carry everything alone, that grief does not disappear just because time passes, and Ethan listened without interrupting, because hearing those words from someone who shared his past made them harder to ignore, and although he did not respond right away, something shifted inside him, because for the first time in years someone had seen through the life he had carefully built, and that night, lying awake, Ethan realized that Claire's presence was not reopening wounds out of cruelty but out of necessity, forcing him to face emotions he had locked away, while in her own room Claire questioned whether staying there was helping or hurting, because she felt the weight of responsibility not just to rebuild her own life after her failed marriage, but also to understand the brother she barely knew anymore. And as the days passed, the house felt warmer but heavier, filled with memories and moments that refused to stay silent, and both of them sensed that this living arrangement was not temporary in the way they had planned, because it was no longer just about shelter or time, it was about two people slowly confronting the parts of themselves they had avoided for years. And neither of them could yet say where that would lead or how long they could keep pretending everything was fine. As the weeks moved forward, the house no longer felt unfamiliar, but the emotional weight inside it grew stronger, because Claire's steady presence began to change Ethan in quiet but powerful ways, pushing him out of habits he had built to stay protected, and without meaning to, she brought warmth back into his routine, reminding him what shared laughter sounded like, what it felt like to sit across from someone who truly knew his history. And this shift did not happen slowly but all at once, like a door opening after being shut for years, and Ethan found himself thinking more, remembering more. Especially about Lena, the woman he had once planned a future with, the woman whose absence had shaped his solitude, and fate, cruel or kind, chose that exact moment to place Lena back into his path when Ethan saw her unexpectedly in a small local bookstore, standing in the aisle, holding a novel they once loved, and time froze just long enough for his heart to react before his mind could stop it, because she looked different yet familiar, calmer but carrying her own quiet weight, and when their eyes met, there was no shock, only recognition, like two people who had never truly let go. And their brief conversation stayed polite, careful, but beneath every word lived years of what had never been said, and Ethan walked home unsettled, realizing that the past he had avoided was now standing in front of him again. And when he told Claire about the meeting that evening, she listened without judgment, without surprise, as if she had already known this moment would come, and instead of asking what he would do, she asked him how he felt, a simple question that unsettled him more than the encounter itself, because feelings were something he had trained himself not to examine too closely. And over the next few days, Lena's return lingered in his thoughts, pulling him between hope and fear, while Claire continued encouraging him in small ways, reminding him that avoiding pain also meant avoiding joy. And although Ethan resisted at first, something inside him softened, and he began to understand that his sister had not come into his life by accident, because her own heartbreak had made her stronger, wiser, and capable of seeing truths he refused to admit. And meanwhile Claire herself was facing her own healing, reconnecting with old friends, rebuilding confidence, learning to exist again after a marriage that slowly erased parts of her identity, and watching Ethan struggle stirred empathy rather than concern, because she recognized the look of someone standing at the edge of change, afraid to move forward but unable to stay still. And when Ethan finally ran into Lena again, this time at a quiet cafe, their conversation lasted longer, touching carefully on the past without reopening it fully, and Ethan felt something awaken inside him, not just longing but clarity, because he realized that his fear had never been about losing Lena again, but about trusting himself to survive it if he did. And that night, sitting alone, he admitted a truth he had avoided for years, That love had never left him, only patience, and Clare noticed the shift immediately, the way he stood straighter, spoke more openly, and seemed less guarded, and she knew that her role was not to interfere but to support, to remind him that life does not wait for perfect timing. And as autumn deepened and the days shortened, the house became a place of reflection and quiet courage, where past and present collided gently, and Ethan understood that his sister moving in had not disrupted his life, but revealed what had been missing. And although the future remained uncertain, one thing became clear, that running from emotion no longer felt like safety, and whatever came next, whether hope or heartbreak, he was finally ready to face it head-on. The change arrived quietly, the way real endings and real beginnings often do, and Ethan felt it before anyone said it out loud, because Clare had begun packing her things with calm purpose, not sadness, folding clothes neatly, making lists, smiling more easily, and when she finally told him she had found a small apartment nearby, he felt pride instead of loss, because he could see that she was ready to move forward, stronger than when she had arrived. And on her last morning in the house they shared coffee at the kitchen table, sunlight filling the room in a way it never had before, and Clare spoke honestly, saying that moving in had helped her remember who she was before disappointment reshaped her, and that watching Ethan confront his own fears had reminded her that healing does not come from hiding. And when she hugged him goodbye, it was not heavy or final but warm and hopeful, the kind of goodbye that promises connection rather than distance. And after she left, the house felt different, not empty but open, like space waiting to be used. And that evening Ethan stood outside Lena's apartment, heart racing, knowing that this moment carried no guarantee, only honesty. And when the door opened and she stood there, surprised but calm, he spoke without rehearsing, telling her he was no longer afraid of feeling, that the past still mattered but did not control him. And Lena listened carefully, her expression thoughtful, because time had taught her caution, yet his sincerity reached her, and they talked quietly, not about fixing everything, but about understanding what had broken before, acknowledging mistakes, distance, and fear on both sides. And although there was no promise made that night, something real was restored, respect, trust, and the possibility of rebuilding slowly. And as Ethan walked home under the evening sky, he realized that his sister moving in had never been about interruption, it had been about reflection. Because through Clare's presence he had rediscovered family, courage, and emotional honesty. And over the following weeks life continued with small meaningful changes. Ethan spent less time hiding behind work, more time engaging with people, while Clare visited often, their bond stronger than before, built on understanding instead of obligation. And Lena and Ethan met again, walking, talking, learning how to exist in each other's lives without pressure, allowing something gentle to grow rather than forcing it. And Ethan no longer measured happiness by certainty, but by willingness to try, to feel, to risk disappointment. And as autumn faded into winter, he understood that some chapters do not close loudly, they settle into place, shaping who you become. And what began as a simple act of letting someone stay had quietly transformed his life, because sometimes the people who walk back into your world do not come to stay forever, they come to remind you who you are. And when Ethan finally looked ahead, he did not see fear anymore, only the calm strength of someone who had faced his past and chosen to move forward, ready for whatever came next.